Welcome to the 30/30 Health Podcast. The following discussion is for education and entertainment. It is not intended to diagnose or treat disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first discussing it with your doctor. Here is your host, Dr. Ruiz.
Hello everyone, my guest today is Mickey Trescott. Mickey prides herself in finding creative solutions to preparing, cooking, and succeeding on allergen-free diets. She is the author of the best-selling guide to the Autoimmune Protocol, the Autoimmune Paleo Cookbook, and co-author of the Autoimmune Wellness Handbook, an award-winning whole lifestyle approach to healing with autoimmune disease. She is also the creator of the video-based cooking program AIP Batch Cook. In today's show, we discuss the Autoimmune Paleo Protocol to heal autoimmune disease with a diet approach. I hope you enjoy the show. And remember to visit my website, 3030strong.com. Hello everyone, my guest today is Mickey Trescott. You know, everyone knows Mickey, but I met Mickey at AHS this year, and we connected and we had so much fun listening to lectures. Mickey, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Guillermo.
Oh, no, it's so much fun. In my practice, I constantly talk about AIP with my patients. And there's like two subsets of people, you know, like the subset A is like, well, I think you need to do an AIP. And they're like, been doing it for 3 years. And subset B is like, what? So I kind of want to bridge that gap, and maybe the people that have been doing it and have not received the benefits, maybe there's something else missing. And for subset B, you know, what the fuck is AIP? So
Totally.
Yeah. So but before we start, you know, why don't you tell us your hero story? How did you come into this space?
Yeah, I like how you phrase it, hero story. So it didn't feel like I was a hero when I was going through it, but I'm sure most people say that. So it all started about now 7 or so, maybe a little more years ago. I was 26 years old, and I got diagnosed with 2 autoimmune diseases. And before my diagnosis, I had struggled for only a year, which I say only. In my life at that time, it seemed like an incredible amount of time to be suffering and looking for an answer. But I have met, hundreds, if not thousands of people who have suffered far longer. And actually, the average time that it takes an autoimmune patient to find a diagnosis is 5 years, and they go through 5 or 6 doctors. So I actually went 1 year. I did see the 5 or 6 doctors in that 1 year. I'm pretty persistent. But I went from having a seizure on Christmas Day after having baked cinnamon rolls and drinking beer with my friends. I lived in Seattle at the time, and I didn't have any local family, and I had a bunch of friends in the area that didn't have family either. So we decided to gather and bake cinnamon rolls from scratch. At the time I was vegan, and so we made these beautiful vegan cinnamon rolls full of sugar and gluten, and that's all I ate that day, and hung out with my friends. And
but
that
they didn't
night,
have cholesterol.
But they didn't have cholesterol. They had plenty of gluten though, and for a celiac, at that point I didn't know, but it was foreshadowing for sure that I have neurological symptoms when I get exposed to gluten, and I didn't know that. So I had a really scary episode that night, and when I went into the doctor the next day, admittedly, I didn't go immediately to the emergency room. I didn't have insurance. So, I was called my grandfather, who's a rheumatologist. By the time I called him, I was on the West Coast. He's on the East Coast. It was early morning for him, and I woke him up and kind of told him what happened. And he asked me some questions, and he was like, I don't think you need to go to the hospital right now, but I do think you should go in and get evaluated. So I went in. And they told me everything was fine. They were like, we don't know what happened to you. We don't know why that happened. And, as far as we can tell, you're in perfect health. And that kind of planted a seed for me that, I went on that journey for a year of then noticing all of these symptoms, which I probably 5 or 6 months in figured out that they were thyroid symptoms. So cold hands and feet, shedding of my hair, insomnia, a lot of like emotional instability. So a lot of panic attacks and very, very short fuse. And I was just freezing all the time. I mean, when I took my temperature, I was literally 95 degrees. And I would go in to see a doctor and I would have this whole routine where I would find a new doctor. I would go in, I'd be all excited and, pumped up, like they're going to figure out what's wrong with me. And I'd be so brave and say, I think these are thyroid symptoms. Can you test my thyroid? And they would always say, you're not overweight. You're not, in your 40s. You're not going through menopause. These are usually our thyroid people. You're not one of them. And your thyroid's normal. So we think it's anxiety, here's some antidepressants kind of a thing. And it was just so demoralizing because at that time I was not assertive. I didn't know how to advocate for myself. And so it took a lot, then the process would start over. I'd go back, I'd cry, I'd wait a couple months, I couldn't go to bed. And then I'd be like, gosh, I really need to find another doctor to try to figure out. And all these doctors I'd asked, is my vegan diet contributing to this? And that should have been ding, 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 probably a problem. And they all said, no, the diet's great. Your cholesterol of 110, kid you not, that was my total cholesterol. That's great. You're never going to have heart disease. And so eventually I landed on a naturopathic doctor who did test me for antibodies to my thyroid and actually tested me for celiac antibodies, and they both came back positive. And I got both diagnoses. The celiac was very surprising because, I didn't think I had any gut problems. But this doctor still said, your thyroid levels are normal, so there's nothing I can tell you to do but go on a gluten-free diet. So from there, and I will wrap this up as quickly as I can. That's
No,
when
this
I
is
had
like
my
super interesting.
Okay. It's a long story. I've told it a lot, so I'm always aware of like, wow, this is kind of, long. But when I got my diagnosis, a lot of people that produces, a change for them, or maybe they get a treatment, or maybe they get some like functional medicine treatment, or they change their diet or whatever. That didn't happen for me. This doctor was basically like, here's all this information about what's wrong with you, but there's nothing I can do. So I actually got way worse in the 3 months following my diagnosis. I went gluten-free. So I was doing the gluten-free vegan diet and I went so downhill. I mean, I started to have new symptoms that were not explained by Hashimoto's or celiac. So I started having pleurisy, which is inflammation, the lining of the lungs. I mean, it hurt every time I took a breath in. I started having a lot of neurological symptoms that before they were transient. So I would get maybe some dizziness, or I would just be a little like fumbly and kind of like not very coordinated. But then I started losing feeling in the left side of my body. So my left hand, my left foot, and then I would get burning pain at night up to my knees and my elbows. So it would like travel up. And I mean, it was just so painful. I couldn't sleep. And then it started happening on my face. So it started going down the left side of my face, and I started slurring my speech. The dizziness got very, very bad. So I really had a hard time going downstairs. I always felt, like I was having kind of vertigo episodes and stuff. And so when I went in to the doctor, they referred me right away to a neurologist. And the neurologist said that, they want to do an MRI and see if maybe I had developed something like MS. And because of my insurance situation, it was very complicated. And, as people know that maybe don't have insurance or don't have a lot of money and then they buy into a bad insurance policy. I mean, I was just stuck in the worst part of the system where I had to wait 2 months for that MRI. So in that 2 months, I'm thinking, there's no way I don't have MS. Like I have these 2 other autoimmune diseases, I have all this, symptoms. And so I lost my job. I couldn't get out of bed. And then psychologically, I lost it. So I had the MRI and they said, it doesn't look like you have MS, but we do see inflammation and we don't know what it's from. And we want you to wait 6 months and we want to repeat the testing and we want to do some other tests in 6 months. And I remember when they said that, I was like, I'm not going to wait with this for 6 months. Like, I'm not going to wait and see. And so that's when I went, you know what? I've asked every doctor about diet. Nobody has really given me the encouragement to maybe consider that that's a problem, and that's the only thing I have control over. So that's where I started Googling, and I actually started Googling people on a vegan diet that had autoimmune disease, like success stories, and I found none. I found a lot of people out there saying, I'm vegan and I just got diagnosed with lupus or Hashimoto's or MS, and I feel awful and I don't know what to do. And I never saw any threads of people saying, oh, this is how I got better with vegan. It just didn't happen. So what I did come across was especially like Rob Wolf and Chris Kresser, because of their vegetarian backgrounds, saying then about talking about paleo, and they had some very little slivers of information about autoimmune disease, but that really rung true for me because of their background that they shared about vegetarianism and that kind of thing. Just the way that they wrote had a lot of authority for me. And I kind of first started to think like maybe I should start eating a different way. So from there, I found AIP. It was a very long transition. I hadn't eaten meat for over 10 years. And I had some really specific situations that made me think this is the right way, this is the right thing to do. And one of them was the first time I ate red meat, I thought I would be sick. So I had my husband cook, a little bit of lamb, ground lamb, with some vegetables, and he had to like really hide it in the vegetables. And I couldn't be in the room when he cooked it because I didn't like the way it smelled. And, I just ate a few bites of it. And I went to bed and I sat in my bed thinking like, I'm just going to feel terrible. I'm going to feel sick because, when you're vegan, everybody says you can't digest the meat and whatever. And I felt really warm and I felt really good. And I had my thermometer sitting next to my bed and I took my temperature and it was 97 degrees. And I was like, oh, my body is telling me something. And now I know it's probably all those B vitamins, it's a little stimulating, my cheeks got a little red. And I just hadn't felt that feeling in so long that I was like, okay, this is the right track. And kind of the rest is history. I used AIP over the next probably 3 years. It took me to really fully recover. And still to this day, using principles of diet and now lifestyle, which has been a new thing in the last few years, and functional medicine and all together to kind of figure out how to get well. So that's my journey in a nutshell.
So, tons of questions, like, why were you vegan?
Well, that's actually a great question because so I grew up not eating healthy food really specifically. So I grew up on a pretty standard American diet, but I actually really liked vegetables, and my mom was not a vegetarian, but kind of like she knew vegetables were important and she cooked a lot of vegetables and made a lot of salads, and I enjoyed eating like her. I think as a little kid, I wanted to be like my mom, and I just looked up to her and I ate the way that she did. But then as I got older, I just noticed that I didn't digest meat very well. Like red meat, I would just get a stomach ache and stuff. And now I know it was probably because I couldn't digest it. I had something going on there. But when I went to college, so I didn't grow up on this awful junk food diet or anything. I was always the kid that had like salad at hot lunch or something. And all the teachers were like, you're so healthy. And that reinforces for a kid. If someone tells you, yeah, good job, you keep doing something. But then when I was in college, I had a roommate who was vegan, and I moved in with her in an apartment. So we were sharing a kitchen. And I remember she was very militant and very strict about it. And I remember, first year college, you're like, you don't want to offend anyone. You kind of like are very impressionable. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll try this for a couple weeks. And, I don't want to like bring meat in the house and like make her feel weird or something. So I went vegan for a couple weeks, and I'd actually had asthma my whole life. And I had a whole string of inhalers that I had to take every day. And it was a big problem for me as a kid. I was never allowed to do any sports. I wasn't allowed to do PE because it would bring up these coughing fits. And looking back, things like ice cream, if I went to a birthday party and I had ice cream, which I normally wouldn't have ice cream, I would end up a couple times I went to the emergency room because I couldn't breathe because I had such bad asthma attacks. So there was this thread that maybe dairy was a thing for me. And then when I went vegan, I found out that my asthma was actually an allergy to dairy. So I went vegan. I went off all my inhalers in like 2 weeks. I called my mom. I said, Mom, I'm not using my inhalers anymore. And she was like, gonna put down the phone and like drive from California to Colorado to like force me, because I was her oldest kid and she was really worried about me that I was just gonna like have an asthma attack and whatever. But since then, I never needed them. And I thought that it was a vegan diet. I didn't know that it was because I was allergic to dairy. So I felt so much better. I went out, I bought a pair of running shoes. I went running for the first time in my life at 18 years old. And so I really thought that vegan diet was the way to go. And now I know that it was because back then there weren't a lot of vegan junk foods. I was cooking my own food. I was probably eating less gluten. I mean, I probably had the beginnings of celiac disease going on there. And that's why I felt great.
That's one misconception that people have. It's like correlation does not mean causation. And that's the same, even with a paleo diet, you start doing a paleo diet. And remember back in like 2008, when there weren't any paleo muffins and paleo pizza, and it was
yeah.
it was a process of exclusion, and because you were self-selecting into this model, you stopped eating out. So you start losing weight, you start feeling better, but like at the basis, paleo is so much more than just eliminating wheat and exchanging your sugar for stevia. It's way more than that. But you self-select into this group. You don't know much, so your rules are so strict. And I can see that happening with the vegan diet too. It's like, okay, I'm going vegan. What am I going to eat? Lettuce.
For me, it meant a lot of cooking. That's where I learned to cook, and that's, you're totally right. When you're cooking, I mean, baking bread is actually really hard to do. So, when you're cooking for yourself, you're not like making tons of bread and stuff. Like I learned how to cook vegetables. I learned how to use, natural raw foods, and that's what I got into cooking, and I think that's why I felt so much better.
Up until you learn how to make cinnamon rolls, and then the wheels fall off, But
exactly.
That's exactly what happens, Okay, so you have this seizure, and there's two things about this. What was the explanation the doctors told you for having a seizure?
Nothing. In the very early days, I was very scared. I was very emotional. I'd never, other than the asthma, I'd never had like a medical problem before. And so when I went in, my world was, am I okay? Am I not okay? And they were just like, you're okay. Like, they were like, we don't know why this happened. And, they did all kinds of testing. And, when my mom got involved, she was like, took me to her doctor and he did a bunch of testing, and, they couldn't figure it out. And I think part of it was that maybe they didn't believe my account of what happened. That I think was part of it, which, I know what happened because my husband was there and I was unconscious and he knows what happened. So, it was a little bit, when you're young and you don't look sick, there's a big misconception, especially, no offense, but male doctors, when you go in, you're a young woman and you don't look like you're sick and you're very emotional and you've had this crazy experience and you're kind of recounting it, I think they're more likely to say maybe this is psychological.
And I'm learning, because the stigma impregnates the whole health system. And I do have, a background working at an emergency department for kids. And, not to excuse emergency department doctors, but they do amazing things and it's life-changing things and heroic procedures. But in the emergency department, their job is just to figure out if you're dying or not,
Exactly. Yeah.
They're going to make you
sure.
stable. Someone comes, I had a seizure. Are you dying? No. Okay, go to your neurologist.
Yeah, a lot of us with chronic health conditions find that, at times we are faced with things that feel like they're emergencies or life-threatening because of what's happening. And then you get pushed off into the, doctors that deal with chronic illness. And then those doctors are almost equally as dismissive because they don't have a lot of tools for people that have chronic illnesses besides drugs that cover up symptoms. So they kind of are like, yeah, let's wait. Let's see, you got to have that for 6 months before we can really pull out the big guns. And that's really, it's really sad.
So then you get pushed into that system, and
Yeah, yeah.
not only do they only have drugs, they don't have time.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And they don't have time to listen to you and put everything together. So, yeah, it's definitely a very messed up system.
Like, for example, today is my day off, and in reality, I don't have time to sit with every one of my patients and tell them, this is an autoimmune protocol. This is what you should eat on Monday, Tuesday, when I don't have time because I want to help as many people. And the reason I record this podcast is now I'm going to be able to refer them to an hour show on what to do after you leave the office with my assessment and my diagnosis. Or the people that can't come to Arizona to see me as a doctor, now they have a stepping stone. Okay, so you go to the emergency department and they're like, yeah, you're not dying. Follow up with a neurologist, and then you call your rheumatologist grandpa. What did he think?
Oh, he still, even to this day, I mean, I think he thinks I'm crazy. Like, I feel bad saying that, but
But
he's
we
not a
are.
believer. Yeah. Yeah, but even when I got better, I think there was an element of, he's 90 years old. He's a very accomplished person. He's both a medical doctor and has his PhD. Um, in biology, and he's a researcher. He's made a lot of discoveries with interlinking autoimmune disease and cancer. And I mean, he still is actually a professor at the University of Michigan. So he's pretty cool, but he does not believe in diet changes. He does not really believe in anything that I've done. And that's fine. He's happy to see me get healthy, but he's not really an ally in that way. When I was sick, he just told me to find the best specialist I could and do all the testing I could. And of course, I was young and I didn't have a lot of money. So I was kind of like, all right, I'm going to do the best I can. It's hard.
And that leads perfectly into the next question. If you knowing what you know now, if you had if we can take a time machine and go 7 years back, what would you tell yourself in regards of how would you start looking for a practitioner? How would you allocate money? What would you do differently?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of things that I would do differently, but the biggest thing is that I would tell myself is just to kind of be okay with the process and taking it one step at a time. When I look in kind of that 3-year span, all of the things that happened, a lot of them actually happened relatively quickly, and speeding them up, I think, would have been too much. So, for instance, finding my great doctor that I ended up working with in Seattle, she was a naturopath, and I waited 4 months to be on the waiting list for her. What I wish I had done was bypass all of those 5 conventional doctors and then that one naturopath who refused to help me after getting the diagnosis. I wish I would have known that I just needed to find someone good that had a lot of expertise in my particular issue, which, she was a hormone and a thyroid expert, and just got on her list. And I had looked at her list for months thinking there's no way I can wait for 4 months. I need to go see someone else. By the time I'd see 3 and someone else's, that 4 months had passed. So I wish I would have just had the foresight to get on that list, for someone good and wait, because it ended up being, from the start of my journey, almost 2 years till I saw her, and her help, with supplementation and with thyroid medication was completely transformative, in addition to the diet that I had already kind of figured out when I went to see her. So that's a big thing, was just getting the courage and also allocating the funds. That was out of pocket. That's why I didn't see the naturopaths first, because they weren't covered on my bad insurance plan that I already was struggling just to pay my premium. The diet changes, I jumped in pretty quickly once I figured out what I needed to do. I think now a lot of people that are kind of sick come to AIP, and I don't mean to like minimize anyone's experience, but when you've lost your job and you're bedridden and you're just like had a crazy diagnosis and you're kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm in a crisis. I will do anything. Changing from one day to the next, like tomorrow I'm going to stop eating these 20 foods, is not hard, because you're faced with a very difficult life situation. But if you're, functioning pretty well and you're going through your life and you have your job and maybe you're able to care for your kids and you have like a patch of psoriasis on your arm and it's ugly, but or it's painful, but you can still do the things that you need to do. It's not as motivating to say, well, tomorrow I'm going to totally change my entire diet. It might be easier for you to like go gluten-free for a week and then take out dairy for a week and kind of stepstone back into AIP, which is actually what I encourage a lot of people these days, if that's their picture. If the cold turkey way isn't going to work for them, slow and steady is a totally valuable way to do it. So I definitely did the rip off the Band-Aid approach. So I don't think I could have done that any faster, but I think I could have had a lot more patience, that the process just takes time. The path meanders, And for me, I definitely felt like, okay, as I started to eat a better diet and get the inflammatory foods out, I started to notice some changes, and then I'd kind of hit a little kink where, maybe I discovered actually at one point I had a parasite. I had to treat the parasite. The treatment was really hard on me. So it's kind of, you slide back a little bit, but then again, having a doctor to work with and everything, navigate, then you're like back on track. Then I found out about H. pylori. So then I had to kind of treat and deal with that. And so everything kind of, the twists and turns, everything changes. And I think if I would have known that it's not something you can just do all at once. You kind of have to take things in steps and like peel those layers of the onion, as cliche as that sounds. That's what I would say.
Thanks for sharing your story, first of all, because we hear, oh, Mickey, she went AIP and everything changed.
Yeah, a lot of people have that misconception.
And we have the misconception that AIP is going to cure your autoimmune disease and wash your dishes. No, it's just part of the process. And then AIP might not be a forever thing.
It shouldn't be, actually. Yeah.
There you go. It shouldn't be a forever thing.
Yeah.
But one more thing before we start talking about AIP. What would you tell my listeners that maybe are in that in-between step between going to the naturopath or going to a doctor, the functional medicine doctor, that are in bedridden, they have been let go of their jobs, and then people think they are crazy? What words of encouragement can you give them, since you were there, to encourage them to continue turning stones?
Yeah, so I think the biggest recommendation I would have is to plug in to an online community. So when I was sick, that's actually one of the things that helped me learn about all the things that actually helped me get better, was getting on Facebook. I joined a Hashimoto support group, and then I started making friends with other people who were in a similar situation, and a lot of them had really similar stories. And that's actually how I connected with my blog partner, and just commenting on blogs, eventually starting my own personal blog. But really, in these groups, people share what works for them and different practitioners they've worked with, and I made a lot of connections that way. And then there was a spin-off group about the elimination diet. People were sharing recipes and different resources. And so even if you feel like in your real life you're really alone, having that community online gives people a lot of hope and makes you realize that you're not alone. There's like, I made a friend that was my same age, had my exact same diagnoses, had a really similar symptom presentation, and she was in a similar phase of life, having just, found a partner that, she wants to be with for the rest of her life. And, kind of that post-college few years struggling financially and, struggling to find kind of our way in the world. I just felt this great connection, and just knowing that she was there too, even if she was, 5 states over, was really powerful to me. So I think that's what I would do if I were them.
Okay, and so then you start eating paleo, and then what made you decide that you needed something else, or that you wanted to try this autoimmune protocol?
Well, so I knew AIP I was in pretty early, but the problem was it was really hard to go from vegan to AIP because I hadn't eaten meat in so long. And I had a lot of roadblocks to getting there just because I didn't want to cook the meat. I didn't want to smell it. The texture was weird to me. And so that is probably, unless you have people that are listening that are maybe vegan or vegetarian and switching over, most people could just go from switching their food from like the meat pretty easily. But for me, it took a little while to start eating meat. And once I started eating meat, it was very easy to just jump on AIP. And I didn't really do paleo just because I found out about paleo and AIP pretty much at the same time. So I dove right in.
If you had to describe an autoimmune paleo protocol, okay, what would be the differences between a paleo protocol and an autoimmune paleo protocol?
Yeah, good question. So, in paleo, we avoid grains and legumes, dairy, food chemicals, processed foods. I don't know if am I missing anything else?
Sugar,
Um, yeah, sugar, that kind of thing. So with AIP, you take it a little bit further and you also remove eggs, nuts, seeds, including all of coffee, sadly, chocolate, sadly, and all the spices that come from nuts and seeds and their oils and stuff, and nightshade family foods. So these are things like tomatoes, peppers, some herbs like ashwagandha.
I was gonna say it's a nightshade.
Yeah.
No one knows. It
Yeah.
looks like a little tomato.
I know. I know. It looks like a little tomato. There's some weird ones like ground cherries are nightshades, goji berries. So you avoid all of those things in addition. And at the beginning, that's the protocol I followed because that was basically the way that I just said it was how Chris Kresser and Rob Wolf outlined it in the early days. But now Sarah Ballantyne is gone, and she wrote an entire incredible book about it with a lot more guidance about limit on fructose. So she limits to 20 grams a day. She's a limits on some other, like coconut can be problematic in higher quantities because the fiber can cause some people some issues. There's a ban on any food chemicals that are very specific, like thickeners or like guar gum and carrageenan, and any sweeteners, even alternative sweeteners like stevia. So the protocol that I followed was very simple in the beginning, but like we were chatting about earlier, there weren't AIP packaged foods or anything that could even be considered close to AIP packaged foods. So I think naturally the early adopters avoided all of that stuff anyways, So yeah, that's AIP and that's kind of what I followed. And it was a lot of cooking and a lot of, real food and a lot of learning how to make that work for me.
So what are your sources of carbohydrates in an AIP diet?
Yeah, so there are a lot of vegetable carb sources, and that's actually a good question because probably one of the biggest mistakes people make, and a mistake that I definitely make, going too low carb, especially people with thyroid conditions. I know some, I feel good on a lower carb diet, but not a super low carb diet. So that would be things like sweet potatoes, which we have lots of varieties of now. There's purple sweet potatoes, there's white sweet potatoes, which I like the white ones because they're a little bit starchier than the traditional orange ones, yams, hard winter squash. So like your butternut squash kind of a thing.
I just had some acorn squash last night with curry.
Yeah, acorn squash.
Oh my goodness, it was so good.
Yeah. Plantain, which if people aren't familiar with is related to a banana, but if you get a really green plantain, that is probably, other than taro is another root vegetable, those are probably the starchiest. AIP. Cassava too, yucca, cassava. And, I didn't branch out into those more tropical starches in the beginning just because I wasn't familiar with them. So I would maybe eat some sweet potato and something every couple days or every few days. And I definitely struggled with some low energy in the beginning until I figured out, I need to include some of those starches all the time.
How do you cook your yucca?
Yucca, you need to boil it. So you have to boil it first. and then you peel it, and then you can either fry it up, deep. If you have like a countertop deep fryer, that's the best way. I actually get fresh yuca from Mission Heirloom. Have you had their
I have not.
crackers?
I have not.
They're 100% organic and they have no other ingredients. What they do is they harvest the yucca, they grind it into a pulp, and then they dry it out in these big sheets. And Mission Heirloom, my friend owns it, and it's actually a restaurant that caters to AIP. And she's from Venezuela, so this is like traditional food for her, and she's very familiar with it, and the sourcing is impeccable, and they import it and sell it from their restaurant, Mission Heirloom, and they actually have them on Amazon. So that is my favorite way to have yuca.
I just can't, I can eat so much yuca. And my favorite way of preparing it is, boiled, which I don't know if it takes a little bit of like, like an reprogramming, because it's like soft potatoes, like extra soft potatoes.
I know.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a little bit of a acquired taste, but I love it. Just make sure you boil it, you throw away the water, and then boil it again, because yuca has high levels of arsenic, and that second boil, that first throwing away that first water gets rid of like 99% of it. And then with some this is not AIP, with some olive oil, pepper, and garlic, and it's so delicious.
Yep. God, I love those starches.
And then your plantains, do you do it more like a toston or more like a?
Oh, I do all the things with plantains. I do everything from, blend them up and make kind of like a treat out of them, like a pancake or a muffin. Like they're a great base for AIP because that's the starch. Or on the other end, frying them up either green and making tostones, or frying them up when they're sweet.
Oh.
I love. They're
So
amazing.
there's a traditional Caribbean specialty called mofongo. Have you ever had it?
Yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness! So
It's really good.
for people that don't know what mofongo is, it's like mashed plantains, and then you do some bacon, and you fry some bacon, and then you mix the bacon with the bacon fat and the plantains, and it's just so delicious.
It's like better than any mashed potato you'll ever have. It's so
And
good.
these are traditional foods.
Mm-hmm.
And it's mind-boggling that we have all these AIP traditional foods that are based on a starch, and where do they come from? They come from the equator. It's just amazing. Now, what is the role of bone broth within AIP?
Yeah, so that's actually a great transition. AIP isn't just about the foods you eliminate, it's about the foods you add in too. So nutrient density, it's kind of like a 50-50. Um, and a lot of people make this mistake where they pull out all these foods and then they're eating salad with chicken breast and maybe steamed broccoli or something on the side. And what they are not adding is that nutrient density. So bone broth is kind of the cornerstone of the nutrient dense foods. It's something that you cook out of the bones of any animal food. And I am very practical when it comes to my bone broth advice. There are some people who are very specific about how many bones and what kinds and whatever. I just say fill a pot with bones. They can be raw bones, they can be cooked bones. My favorite actually is our bones that have come from things that I cooked earlier in the week, because that means that I don't have to buy them specifically for making broth. So I buy all my meat bone in. So I'll buy like a whole chicken, and then when I'm done, I'll throw that carcass into a bag in my freezer. When the bag is full, I put all the bones in a pressure cooker. I use an Instant Pot, fill it with water, put a little bit splash of vinegar and a bay leaf, lock it, and I cook it for a couple hours. And then, you strain everything and you get this beautiful gelatinous broth that has tons of amino acids. Has some minerals in there, the collagen, gelatin, everything is just really good for your structure. If you think we spend a lot of time eating muscle meats, but really kind of the other bits, so the bones and the organs and everything actually have a lot of nutrition that we need to build our own organs in our own body. Think of our skin. Just the skin is the biggest organ, and what's that made out of? A lot of it, that collagen, is just so important. So I love broth for kind of giving those nutrients and being something that you can either drink straight. Early when I did AIP for the first time, I drank a glass of broth every single day in the morning. Now I use it in my cooking every day. So I still get it, but I put it in soups and stews and, AIP chilies and all kinds of things like that.
I was talking to Lance Roll. He did a lot of Western A Price early in the days, and he used to be the caterer for the Czech program, and he was telling me that there's some people, there's a subset of, just like with paleo and AIP, there's a subset of people that don't feel better with bone broth, and he ran some numbers, on his bone broth, and doing the fast pressure cooker bone broth creates more glutamate. Like even within bone broth, you have like different categories, and if you want to do like a more gentle bone broth, you do like a 2-hour bone broth. So it can get super complicated.
Yeah, so like for people that have issues with histamine, like a shorter cooked broth might be helpful. For people that are sensitive to glutamate, actually also not adding the acid, so not adding the vinegar will help with that too, not extract as much. So yeah, there's definitely different ways you can tweak broth. I always tell people if they react to broth, that's usually a sign that they need to see their practitioner and do some troubleshooting because it's just a symptom, and it might be something that if maybe they have a histamine intolerance because they have SIBO, maybe they treat the SIBO and that goes away, or maybe they have methylation issues and treating that can actually help resolve that. So I always look at these things. A lot of people get really frustrated when they're sensitive to foods that are supposed to be so good for them.
Like
But
sauerkraut.
yeah, that's a perfect example. With SIBO, a lot of people have issues with the histamine. So it can be just a great sign for people that they need to kind of address an area.
And we should see this reactions as like as a win, because now we have we're, like you said earlier today, we're peeling the onion and we're getting closer to the solution. So anytime you have this paradoxical reaction, well, it's just information that's going to get us closer to where we need to be. So is there a place where someone that that is new to this that can get some information on how to adopt an AIP protocol?
Yeah, so the place is my website. I've started my personal blog 6 years ago, or maybe a little longer at this point. And then 3 years ago, I joined forces with another AIP blogger, Angie Alt. And so previously, my blog was called Autoimmune Paleo, and we combined forces and we created Autoimmune Wellness because we wanted to kind of create this space for people that wanted to learn about not only the elimination diet, but this piece that we've been talking about, working with a practitioner, advocate for your health, and also all the lifestyle changes that are helpful for people with autoimmune disease. So at our site, we have over 250 recipes for people that sign up for our email list. We have a free lists of foods to include and foods to avoid. So super detailed lists with like all the food categories. People like to print them out and stick them on their fridge. We also send out a 2-week meal plan that includes all recipes that are on our site. And then we also send out a batch cooking video and some other resources. So for people that get plugged in there, everything's there for free. We don't believe in kind of putting everything behind a paywall. It's just this information has really transformed our lives, and we kind of want to put that out there so that anyone that wants to do it can have an easier time, because back in when we started, there were no resources, there were no handy lists. We're really grateful for the people that were podcasting and kind of talking about it, but they were kind of working on just convincing people to eat paleo, not really AIP. So that's what our site's about. There are so many recipes in the AIP community. At this point, there are thousands of recipes. We have over 250 on our site in all the categories. So everything from appetizers, quick meals, desserts, everything. And the site's a pretty cool place.
What are some of the lifestyle AIP changes?
Yeah. So, food is one piece. And when Angie and I wrote our book last year, we only had diet be one chapter, and we have 7 chapters of our book. And they're the 7 areas that we really believe that someone with autoimmune disease needs to address to get well. So after hearing us talk for probably a while now just about food, it's like, wait, there's all this other stuff. And it's, I believe that all of these parts are equal. So the first step is inform. So being an informed patient, learning about your condition and having the knowledge to kind of know what to do is really important, collaborating. So working with a physician that gets you, that might also mean working with a health coach or a nutritional therapist. It might mean working with some complementary care, maybe, a massage therapist or a fitness instructor or something, depending on what you need. But learning how to collaborate with people is important. And then as far as the lifestyle stuff, sleep, movement, connection, both with people, both with nature, studies show that both ways are very important for the immune system. And then also stress management. Yeah, there's a lot of other things that people can focus on.
And that's something that, I keep repeating myself, and that we focus so much on, in the allopathic world, we focus so much on physiology and what drug is going to make that physiological change. And then sort of in like this complementary medicine, we look at, you have diabetes. What's going to be the herb or the supplement that's going to change that diabetes? And that's not very far from the allopathic way of thinking. You're substituting a supplement or an herb for medication. It's not really naturopathic medicine. Naturopathic medicine is like the action of peeling that onion and getting to the root cause of disease and removing the obstacle to health. And we need to start, venturing. And thank you for writing those extra 6 chapters because we really need to talk about community and exercise and spirituality and meditation and however you want to look at that aspect. But we need to have protocols and we need to have practices in where we are including that. Now everyone is talking about this AIP study that just came out. So do you want to tell my listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah. So about a year and a half ago, my partner Angie Alt and I, who blogs with me at Autoimmune Wellness, and we also wrote the Autoimmune Wellness Handbook together. She discovered our site as a result of so the gastroenterologist at Scripps discovered our site as a result of working with a patient who had ulcerative colitis and was in a pretty rough shape. Possibly was going to need surgery. And this patient said, "Hey, I've heard of this AIP diet. I'd like to try it." And the doctor said, "Great, see you in a month. We'll follow up." So he does AIP for a month or maybe a little more, comes back. She does a colonoscopy. She just could not believe how disease-free his intestines were. And she said, "Can you please give me some information about what you did?" And he said, "Yeah, I did AIP. This is the website whose materials I used," and referred her to our site. So she submits a contact form, says, "Hey, I'm a doctor. I want to talk to you guys about this diet. I don't know anything about it, but I had a patient with great results." So we get on Skype with her, and she says that she wanted to do some research on the diet because of this patient that had such great results. And my partner runs a program called SAD to AIP in 6 that transitions people from the standard American diet to AIP in 6 weeks. So she does a phased elimination every week, takes 1 or 2 food groups away so that at the end of 6 weeks, they're fully compliant, and it's all done group health coaching style. So they have a private group on Facebook. They do meal planning together. They share recipe resources. They go, they get deep support. It's not like, here's a list of things you're going to stop eating all of a sudden starting tomorrow. There's someone there coaching them through like, hey, what do I do if my husband thinks I'm crazy or whatever? So the doctor signed on with Angie to replicate or create basically a group of her program for the study. And she enrolled from people in San Diego that had ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. And it took about a year to see the results because, medical studies are hard. People have to be following up with their doctors and whatnot. But the results were great. They found that 73% of the participants who had an average disease time of 19 years among them. So these were people who were very sick. Many of them, biologic medications had failed. 73% of them found clinical remission by week 5, which is before they even were fully compliant on the elimination diet. And then they all remained in remission through the duration of the maintenance phase, which was another 6 weeks. So it was pretty powerful stuff.
So 2 things. 19 years with this disease, and then over a period of 5 weeks, they get results. How frustrating is that? How amazing! And I just want to pull my hair. Second thing you said that they failed on the biological. I about a year ago, I was shadowing Dr. Christensen, who I work with now, and we had a patient, and the patient said, and I failed on what biological, and Dr. Christensen stopped the intake and said, no, the medication failed you. So let's start changing the our verbiage, and let's start changing because that's how people get into this deep holes of getting lost in the healthcare system. You did not evolve taking Humira. You did not evolve taking these biological drugs. Those drugs are not serving you. You have the power to serve yourself. But
for sure. 100% agree.
It's amazing, the power, but it's just diet.
Yeah, and it's tricky. There's been, there will always be naysayers. It was, a small study, only 15 people, and there were a lot of things that were implemented in Angie's program. There's lifestyle changes. She tells people to sleep. She tells people to manage their stress. She has them, do some movement, a little exercise. She has them work on their connections with other people. So yeah, the diet is really the core of what they were studying, but a part of it was also that when you put all of these things together, it works. And a lot of people look at that and they say, well, maybe it's because, everyone was exercising, or maybe it's because they were sleeping, and maybe it's not the diet. And more studies will hopefully come and kind of suss out, but I think we all know from personal experience that putting all these things together works. For some people, the pieces are more important than others. I know people who, their life has been changed by stress management, and I know other people who have done all the things right and nothing changes for them. And how common is that story? It's the same thing with diet. There's a spectrum in every area, what is going to be most helpful for people, and they just have to figure out where they lie in that area and how to figure out what they need to do to get better. It's not because I have Hashimoto's disease and I did this, it doesn't mean that if you have Hashimoto's disease and you do the same thing, you're going to get the same results. It doesn't work that way.
And to the naysayers that have not suffered with 19 years of diarrhea or chronic pain,
or even losing a part of your intestine, a lot of surgery, Crohn's and colitis is very serious, and the medical, the best, I guess, end of the road treatment is just taking out organs and part of you that, that's really depressing to have to look at losing a part of you to a disease like that.
To those naysayers, what's it to you to try something, for 5 weeks?
Because it's threatening to the very core of the way that we've done things forever. So, for people listening, if you have experience with AIP, and you talk to maybe a traditional doctor, or you talk to your relatives at Thanksgiving or something, and you want to know why people are so offended at the idea that maybe something like this could work, it's because it goes against the entire system, and that is always painful. And if you're doing something that is changing the system, there will always be naysayers. There will always be people telling you that it's wrong and just kind of being pissed off about it. So I take it as a testament that we're doing good work. We're doing the right thing. We're trying to break the mold and trying to think of these problems that, most people are not looking at the statistics about chronic disease the way that, Guillermo and I are, because we're in this world. But things are not looking good. We got to figure something out. We got to figure it out as quick as we can. And we need to get the message out there because people are suffering. Like when I told my story about going into the doctor's office at 26 and having doctor after doctor tell me, this isn't your problem. You don't have a thyroid problem. This doesn't happen to people like you. I know so many people like me that this has happened to. I know so many people that have emailed me and said, your story is my story. I know people younger than me that have gone in and been diagnosed with these autoimmune diseases as teens and even kids. And that used to be shocking. And it's not shocking now. It happens all the time.
Yeah, it sounds like conspiracy theory but that's what I do day in and day out. I get people in front of me telling me, this is it. This is the end of the road for me. I've seen so many doctors, and then I look at at their labs. I look at their stool analysis. I look at their SIBO tests, and I'm like, oh, so you've been having diarrhea for the past, for how long have you had the diarrhea for? And this is just because they have methanogenic bacteria creating gas in their SIBO, and they're like, how do you know? It's blatant. Like those results are in front of me, and I'm like, oh, so you've been cold for how long? Their TSH is above 4, and used to see it day in and day out. It's not a conspiracy to me. It's my reality. This is what I see day in and day out. But how are we going to change the world? How are we going to create an army of people with the tools to go? Because I'm not enough, you're not enough. We need an army of people with the knowledge to touch as many people. So what can we do if we want to be part of this new way of looking at health?
So I have two answers to that question. First, if you're a patient and you're someone who's seeking health and on your own healing journey, be that person who talked to their doctor in a way that was collaborative. This whole study came out of a patient who followed our blog, who used the information we gave them without any guidance, changed their life, talked to their doctor, and got them interested. 5 years ago, I never heard of people saying, oh, I talked to my doctor about this and they sounded interested, or even my doctor told me to do this. Now I hear it all the time. So people talking to their medical providers, and even if those providers are skeptical, if you have a result that's raises some eyebrows, like maybe your antibodies go away, or maybe your formerly ulcerated colon all of a sudden is disease free, that provider is going to go, wait a minute, what did you do? And that's going to spark curiosity, and that's going to help us, move this faster within the medical community. Now, the second thing is if you are at all in the medical community. So if you're an MD, if you're, a naturopathic doctor, chiropractor, even, health coach, whatever, you can learn about AIP and you can learn about how to help your clients and your patients implement it. And actually, that's part of the work that I'm doing right now, is figuring out how I can pass on what I've learned. I'm actually a nutritional therapy practitioner. I don't think that I mentioned that at all yet in this podcast, because we focused a lot on my personal story. But when I was in my healing journey and I wasn't working, I had a lot of time to think about my life's mission and what I wanted to do. And I'd previously worked as a chef. I was very interested in food and recipe development and creation. And I went back to school to study nutrition because I thought that I wanted to put together that love and passion for cooking and teaching cooking together with good nutrition education to do whatever my next step would be, and didn't know that it would be blogging and writing books. But I now believe that my life's work is to just get the word out about this. And I've worked privately with clients for the last 4 years. But I, like you said, Guillermo, we're not enough. The two of us, or, even the 20 of our friends that are really making great strides in this area, are not enough to address this chronic disease epidemic. And a lot of people are getting into healthcare with the right intentions and really learning about functional medicine and wanting to be a part of this process. And I really believe that health coaches and nutritional therapists are the bridge. They are between, the patient who's very self-motivated and willing to be educated and make the changes, and the doctor who's also very educated in functional medicine and can order all the lab testing. I don't really see a reality where the patient and the doctor are going to be able to collaborate in a way that the patient's calling the doctor up saying, I don't know how to cook a sweet potato. That's not appropriate, right? We need someone in the middle, which I believe that's the health coach's role, someone who is really educated in the nutrition, in the cooking and the implementation, and can really hold that patient's hand and understand how they can solve creative problems like, what if the rest of my family doesn't eat this way? Or how do I eat out? Or, et cetera, et cetera. So I've created a program called AIP Certified Coach with my partner Angie Alt and also Sarah Ballantyne, who kind of wrote the AIP Bible. Her book's called The Paleo Approach. It's really amazing. And we collaborated together to create this program to teach all kinds of practitioners, whether they be health coaches all the way up to MDs, how to implement AIP. And, we really want to gift all of this information to people so that they can then use that to transform the lives of their patients and just make it that much easier for them to actually do this.
And is this like a rolling enrollment?
Yeah, so we do enrollments at least once a year. We had one class in 2017 over the summer, and for 2018, we're opening up enrollment March 1st for a March 26th start. It's online, but we do teach it live, and there's a lot of discussion, and it's a very important part of the program, just being able to talk through and collaborate. We actually didn't anticipate that the group would be so collaborative with each other, which I think is really a testament to where our movement is going as far as functional medicine and this new way of looking at healthcare, because all of these practitioners we had from health coaches to MDs in the group just really collaborating with each other and finding creative solutions to problems that I don't even know the answer to. And it was just a really beautiful thing. So yeah, we have a site, aipcertified.com. If people are interested, they should get on the interest list because we do have a limited amount of people we can take since we're teaching. But becoming a part of the movement in educating yourself as a practitioner and learning how to help people. And maybe even if you're on the fence about maybe considering going into healthcare, if you're considering becoming a health coach, or, if you're young enough and maybe crazy enough, becoming, a naturopathic doctor or a medical doctor, we need you, we need more people that are interested in this stuff and who are interested in holistic healing and functional medicine. There's going to be plenty of jobs coming up in the future for people like this. So,
and if anything, it's because people are interested. People are searching for this type of healthcare.
They are searching, and the people that are doing good work, I mean, they just don't have enough time to work with all the people that want to work with them. So we need more people. We need more practitioners.
We need more people. Yeah.
Yeah.
This has been an awesome interview. Hopefully a lot of people can get a bunch of information and either, start their AIP protocol, or maybe tell someone they know or help someone they know, maybe their kid, maybe their spouse, but thank you so much for all the work you do. Where can people find you? Can you give us your handles and your web addresses and the name of your book?
Yeah, awesome. So my books are the Autoimmune Paleo Cookbook. So that's the cookbook that I wrote 5 years ago for AIP. It was the first AIP cookbook. The recipes are timeless. It holds a very special place in my heart, and I love it. You can get it anywhere books are sold, including Amazon. The second book is the Autoimmune Wellness Handbook, and that's the book that I co-authored with Angie Alt, and it includes more information about, kind of in a neat package, all the steps. So like I was talking about, all the other things. If you're newly diagnosed, or someone that's newly diagnosed, this is the best one for them, just because it really has an overview of kind of where people are going to go in their journey with autoimmune disease and kind of how to tick all those boxes. As far as the internet, I can be found at autoimmunewellness.com, and Instagram, we are at Autoimmune Paleo, because Instagram is very food focused. So we are still repping that brand there. Personally, I can be found at Mickey Trescott on Instagram, and I share more of kind of what I'm eating on a daily basis and kind of life on the farm here in Oregon, a little more personal. And if you guys want to get updates from us, just sign up for our newsletter at autoimmunewellness.com. Like I said, there's lots of goodies there for anyone just getting started. And thanks so much for having me.
You said 2 weeks of recipes?
Oh yeah, yep. So all the food lists, if you're like, what do I eat on AIP? We have printable food lists. We do a 2-week meal plan with all the recipes. I have a 90-minute batch cooking video that I send out that is basically me in my kitchen cooking a ton of recipes and answering questions as I do it. It's really fun. So
And how do
yeah,
people get those goodies?
if you go to autoimmunewellness.com, you can scroll to the bottom of any page and it'll ask you to opt in.
Thank you so much. I know this is going to help a lot of people. You know, I keep referring my patients to your site. It's a wealth of information. And, any appearances, any speaking engagements, anything like that?
Yeah, so I will be speaking at the NUNM conference here in Portland in February. I believe that's February 10th. I'll be doing a practitioner presentation and I'll be doing a public presentation. And then I will be at the Nutritional Therapy Association. We'll have a booth for AIP certified coach. I won't be speaking this year though. And I hope to go to PaleoFX. That's a little far out on my calendar right now. But yeah, PaleoFX and AHS I like to include every year. So I'll be
Those are
out
fun.
there.
Awesome. Well, I'll see you
Yeah.
at PaleoFX. I'm definitely going to PaleoFX. So, thank you so much for the
Awesome.
interview. It has been amazing, and I'll see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Thank you so much, Guillermo. It's great to chat with you.